What you're about to witness is the most powerful moment ever captured in Judge Frank Caprio's courtroom. And I'm warning you right now, this story will absolutely destroy you emotionally. A 91-year-old homeless Korean War veteran walks into court for trespassing. But when Judge Caprio asks what's in the old military backpack, he refuses to let go of. What this man reveals stops the entire courtroom cold and triggers a response so massive it changes military history forever. It's a freezing Monday morning in late November. Providence Municipal Court is beginning its regular docket of minor violations and petty offenses. The heating system hums, but the New England chill still slips through the old brick walls. Judge Frank Caprio sits behind his bench at exactly 9:30 a.m., unaware that the next case will become one of the most shared moments of his career. The courtroom is modestly full, 30 or so people scattered across the benches. Families wait for traffic tickets. Lawyers whisper about case files. Court officers move with quiet routine. But there's a strange tension in the air. A sense that something different is about to happen, even if no one can explain why. At 9:47 a.m., the bailiff calls what seems like the most ordinary case imaginable. State of Rhode Island versus James Patrick Sullivan, trespassing. No one expects what follows. Through the heavy oak doors walks James Patrick Sullivan, known to those few who still remember him simply as Jim. The moment he enters, the entire atmosphere shifts. People turn instinctively. It isn't just his age, though he moves with the careful steps of someone who's survived hard winters and harder memories. It's the way he carries himself, upright, deliberate. The echo of parade ground discipline still visible even under the burden of 91 years. What draws every eye, though, is the faded olive-green military backpack strapped tightly to his shoulders. It's worn to the fabric, frayed at the seams, but he holds it as if it contains the most precious thing on earth. He never sets it fully down, never lets it out of reach. Both hands grip the straps with silent vigilance. Jim's clothes tell their own story. A Korean War-era field jacket layered over 2 sweaters despite the warmth of the courtroom. Pants patched with mismatched fabric, boots mended again and again with duct tape and thread. The lines of his face are deep, carved by decades of wind, war, and time, but his pale blue eyes remain startlingly clear, steady, sharp, carrying a kind of unshakable dignity that homelessness has failed to erase. James Patrick Sullivan. The clerk reads, charged with criminal trespassing, sleeping in MacArthur Park after posted closing hours. Jim steps forward, places his backpack beside him, one hand still resting protectively on it. Judge Caprio looks up from the file. His seasoned eyes have seen every type of defendant imaginable, but something about this man stops him. This is not a petty criminal. This is someone carrying an invisible weight far heavier than a simple trespassing charge. Mr. Sullivan, Caprio begins, his voice warm yet formal. You're charged with trespassing in MacArthur Park. According to the report, you were found sleeping on a bench at around 11:45 p.m. The park closes at 10. Is that accurate? Yes, Your Honor, Jim replies, his voice surprisingly strong, steady, unmistakably military in tone. I was sleeping there. I'm guilty of trespassing. Caprio sets his pen aside. That small gesture always signals he's moving beyond the paperwork toward the person. Do you have somewhere to stay? Somewhere besides the park? No, Your Honor. Jim answers without hesitation. I've been homeless about 4 years now. I move around the city. Try not to bother anyone. Caprio studies him, noting the jacket, the posture, the backpack. Something inside the judge stirs, a quiet intuition telling him that there's much more beneath the surface. May I ask your age? 91, Your Honor. Born January 15, 1933. The judge's eyes widen slightly. A man born during the Great Depression. A witness to almost every major chapter of modern American history. World War II, Korea, Vietnam, the Cold War, 9/11. And now, in his 10th decade, homeless. I notice you're wearing a field jacket. Caprio continues gently. Did you serve? The question transforms Jim instantly. His shoulders straighten, his chin lifts, and for a moment the frail man disappears, replaced by a Marine standing at attention. Yes, Your Honor, he says proudly. United States Marine Corps, Korea 1950-53, then Vietnam, military advisor, 65-68. 2 wars. The courtroom murmurs softly. Even the bailiff straightens unconsciously at the words. Judge Caprio rises from behind his bench and steps forward, closing the distance between them. It's something he does only when a case touches him deeply. Jim, he says, using the man's first name, you served in 2 wars. That's extraordinary. Tell me about it. Jim's gaze drifts somewhere far beyond the courtroom walls. Korea first. I was 17 when I lied about my age to enlist. Thought I was invincible. Shipped out to Busan September 50. Fought at Incheon, then Chosin Reservoir. The judge nods, understanding the gravity. Chosin Reservoir, frozen hell, one of the most brutal battles in Marine Corps history. Many never returned. Those who did carried it forever. As Jim speaks, Caprio can't help noticing his constant contact with that backpack, his left hand resting on it even while he gestures. Jim, he asks quietly, I hope you don't mind my asking, but what's in the backpack? You haven't let go of it once. For the first time, Jim hesitates. His jaw tightens, his grip on the straps hardens. The air in the room shifts again. Your Honor, he says slowly, voice trembling. It's my boys. The words hang there, strange, haunting. Your boys. Caprio repeats softly. Jim nods. All my boys? A silence falls so complete it's almost sacred. Would you feel comfortable showing me what's inside? Caprio asks, careful not to sound like a judge demanding evidence, but like one human being asking another to share his truth. Jim's eyes flicker around the room, faces of strangers, curiosity mixed with compassion. He swallows hard. People think I'm crazy sometimes, he murmurs. Think the war broke something in me, but I made them a promise. Caprio meets his eyes. Jim, in 30 years on this bench, I've never thought anyone was crazy for keeping a promise. Please show us. Jim inhales deeply, the kind of breath that seems to come from 70 years ago. Slowly, with shaking hands, he kneels and unzips the faded backpack. What spills out catches the light. Small metal objects, hundreds of them, clinking softly like distant wind chimes, dog tags. Each tag a name, each name a life. Gasps ripple through the courtroom. These are my boys, Jim says, lifting one carefully between thumb and forefinger. Private First Class Michael Chen, San Francisco, California. 19 years old. Died at Chosin Reservoir, December 6, 1950. I held him while he froze. He told me to tell his mother he wasn't scared, that he was thinking about her Sunday pot roast. Caprio steps closer, unable to look away. Jim continues, pulling another tag. Corporal Robert Martinez, El Paso, Texas. 20 years old. Covered our retreat. Last thing he said was, tell my little sister I love her. I'll be her angel at her quinceanera. Another. Lance Corporal Joseph O'Brien, Boston. 18, jumped on a grenade, gave me his rosary, said, tell my ma I died with Jesus in my heart. By now people are openly weeping. The prosecutor wipes his eyes. The court reporter pauses her typing. Jim lays several tags carefully across the defense table, aligning them in perfect rows as if they're still on parade. They were kids, he whispers. 18, 19, 20. They never got to come home. I promised them I'd make sure someone remembered. Caprio's throat tightens. How many tags are there? 423, Your Honor. Every Marine I could find from Korea and Vietnam. Everyone whose tag I recovered or who pressed it into my hand before they died. The judge exhales slowly. 423. But Jim isn't finished. He reaches into the backpack again and produces an old notebook, thick and battered, its pages yellowed with age. This is their book, he says softly. Every story I could piece together, where they were born, how they lived, how they died, who they left behind. I've been writing in it since 1953. He hands it carefully to Caprio, who opens it like a sacred text. The pages are filled with cramped handwriting, drawings, maps, addresses, decades of devotion. He reads aloud a line. Michael Chen, born 1931, San Francisco. Mother Ellen, sister May, wanted to be a doctor, volunteered for patrol, died of wounds December 6, 1950. The judge looks up, eyes glistening. Jim, this is incredible. You've built a memorial by hand. Jim nods, emotion thickening his voice. I couldn't let them disappear. Every time I found a tag, I looked for the family. Took years sometimes, but I found them. You found them? Caprio asks, stunned. 287 families so far. Jim answers. I travel however I can, bus, hitchhike, walk. I give them the tag, tell them what I remember, what their boy said, how he died. Some mothers waited 60 years to know. The courtroom dissolves into quiet sobbing. Even the bailiff has tears on his cheeks. Caprio steadies himself. Jim, he says softly, you said you've been homeless for 4 years. Why? Jim shrugs, ashamed. I had a small apartment in Pawtucket. Lived off my pension and Social Security. 4 years ago, the VA stopped my disability payments by mistake. By the time it got sorted out, I'd lost the place. When I had to choose between keeping the roof or finishing my mission, I chose the mission. These boys gave everything. I can give them that much. The silence that follows is absolute. Caprio slowly removes his black judicial robe. In 3 decades, he's done that only for moments that transcend law. He steps forward, kneels beside the backpack, and gently lifts several tags, reading the names under his breath. Then he stands and addresses the courtroom. Ladies and gentlemen, you are witnessing something I have never seen in all my years on the bench. James Patrick Sullivan is not a criminal. He is a guardian of memory, a keeper of promises, a living memorial to 423 Marines who never came home. Applause erupts spontaneously. Caprio raises a hand for quiet. Not only am I dismissing this charge, I'm doing something else. On behalf of the city of Providence and the state of Rhode Island, I appoint you, James Sullivan, guardian of remembrance. Your service honors this nation more than any medal could. A tear streamed down Jim's face, and Caprio continues firmly, effective immediately. I will see that you have housing, that your benefits are restored, and that you receive any help you need to finish finding the remaining families. He pulls out his personal cell phone, breaking every protocol, and dials. General Patterson, this is Judge Caprio in Providence. I have someone you need to meet today, a 91-year-old Marine who has honored our fallen for 71 years. can you come? Within hours, representatives from the National Guard, the VA, and the mayor's office arrive at the courthouse. They listen in stunned silence as Jim tells his story again, showing the tags, the notebook, the photographs, the letters from grateful families. Someone records the conversation. That video will spread across the internet faster than anyone imagines. By nightfall, millions have watched. Within 24 hours, 30 million. Every major network runs the story. The homeless Marine who kept his promises for 7 decades. The world responds with overwhelming generosity. Donations pour into a newly established James Sullivan Memorial Fund to help homeless veterans and preserve his collection. Within a week, it raises $12 million. A local developer donates a house outright so Jim can finally live with dignity. But the most profound responses come from the families. Hundreds of calls, letters, emails, descendants of fallen Marines who recognize names from the news. They want to meet the man who never forgot their sons, fathers, brothers. Among them is Sarah Martinez, 83, sister of Corporal Robert Martinez, the Marine who spoke of his sister before dying at Chosin. She travels from Texas to Providence to see Jim. When they meet, she weeps uncontrollably. For 73 years I wondered, she says. You gave me back my brother. The Smithsonian requests Jim's notebook and tags for a permanent exhibit. The Marine Corps makes him an honorary sergeant major. Invitations pour in from memorials and veterans organizations around the country. Still, Jim remains humble. It's not about me, he tells reporters. It's about them. The 423 boys who gave everything. And then, one morning, a letter arrives from Washington. The President of the United States wants to meet him. The letter came on official stationery, its seal embossed in gold. It was addressed simply to Mr. James Patrick Sullivan. Inside was a personal message written in the President's own hand. Mr. Sullivan, your story has reached the heart of this nation. You exemplify the truest form of service. A promise kept across a lifetime. I would be honored to meet you at the White House to thank you, on behalf of a grateful country. The President of the United States. When Judge Caprio read it aloud in his chambers, Jim sat silently, his weathered hands folded on his lap. He didn't smile. He didn't even react at first. Then softly, he said, Your Honor, the White House, I never thought I'd be invited anywhere like that again. I used to march past it in uniform once, guarding others. Never thought I'd be asked inside. Caprio smiled. You earned it, Jim. Every step. 3 days later, the city gathered to send him off. Veterans lined the courthouse steps, standing at attention as Jim emerged wearing a freshly pressed Marine dress coat donated by a local veterans group. The olive backpack, the same one he'd carried for decades, was on his shoulders. He refused to go anywhere without it. When he reached the waiting car, he turned and saluted Judge Caprio. The gesture was sharp, perfect, like time had rolled backward 70 years. Caprio returned the salute, tears glistening in his eyes. Semper Fi, Marine, he whispered. Semper Fi, Your Honor, Jim replied. The flight to Washington, D.C., was arranged by the Marine Corps. 2 young Marines, 1 male and 1 female, accompanied him. They treated him not as a relic but as a legend. On the plane, they called him Sir, and insisted he take the window seat. When he looked out at the clouds, he thought about all the boys who never made it home. How maybe they were looking back through the same sky. Upon arrival, the honor guard was waiting. A full Marine detachment saluted as Jim stepped onto the tarmac. Cameras clicked, but he hardly noticed. He wasn't thinking about fame or recognition, just about how proud his boys would be to see the corpse still standing tall. The next morning, under a crisp blue sky, Jim stood before the White House gates, flanked by Marines in dress blues. When the doors opened, he walked through slowly, his steps deliberate, carrying the weight of his memories with quiet grace. Inside, in the East Room, the President stood waiting. He was surrounded by cabinet members, generals, and veterans from every branch. But when Jim entered, everyone fell silent. Even the President looked humbled. The moment Jim approached, the President extended his hand. Sergeant Sullivan, he said warmly, on behalf of a grateful nation, thank you. Jim shook his hand firmly. Mr. President, he said, I'm just a Marine keeping a promise. You kept the promise of an entire generation. The President replied. Then, unexpectedly, Jim opened his backpack right there in front of the cameras. He carefully removed a handful of dog tags and the weathered notebook. These belong to them, he said softly. They're the reason I'm still here. The President looked at the tags, visibly moved. Would you allow us to preserve these in the Smithsonian? Yes, sir, Jim said. As long as people remember the names, they'll never die. The ceremony that followed was unlike any other. The President awarded him the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the highest civilian honor in the United States. As the medal rested against Jim's chest, he stood straight as a flagpole, eyes forward, chin high. For a moment, he wasn't 91 years old. He was 17 again, standing at parade rest before his commanding officer. Reporters shouted questions as flashbulbs went off, but Jim's attention was elsewhere. Monsieur President, he said quietly, can I make one request? Anything, the President replied. I want a wall, Jim said. Not a big one, Just a small memorial. For the ones who never came home from Korea and Vietnam. There are walls for some, but not for all. I've got 423 names right here. I'd like them carved in stone. The president nodded. You'll have your wall. It took less than 6 months. With congressional support, private donations, and military assistance, the James P. Sullivan Wall of Remembrance was built in Providence. A gleaming semicircle of black granite engraved with all 423 names from Jim's notebook. Above them were the words he'd repeated for 70 years. They were boys. They never stopped being boys. At the dedication ceremony, thousands gathered. Veterans in uniform, families holding photographs, children waving flags. The Marine Corps band played softly as Jim stood before the wall, the wind rippling through his white hair. Judge Caprio was there too, standing beside him. You did it, Jim, he said quietly. You kept your promise. Jim smiled faintly. We did it, Your Honor. You believed me when no one else did. As the names were read aloud one by one, Jim removed the final dog tag from his backpack, the one he'd kept for himself. Private James P. Sullivan, it read. He laid it gently at the base of the wall. That's the last one, he said. The crowd fell silent. Even the wind seemed to pause. When the ceremony ended, Caprio offered to help him to the car, but Jim shook his head. I want to stay a bit longer, he said. Just me and my boys. That evening, long after everyone had gone, a security guard found Jim still sitting before the wall, head bowed, his hand resting on the granite. He was gone, peacefully, no struggle, no pain. His backpack lay beside him, empty for the first time in 70 years. News of his passing broke the next morning. Every major network carried the headline, James P. Sullivan, the homeless Marine who kept his promise, days at 91 before his wall of remembrance. Across the country, flags flew at half-mast. The Marine Corps honored him with a full military funeral at Arlington National Cemetery. The president attended personally. So did Judge Caprio, who delivered the eulogy. Standing before the casket, Caprio spoke with quiet reverence. Jim Sullivan taught us that honor doesn't end when the war does. It lives in the promises we keep, even when no one is watching. He had nothing, yet he gave everything. He carried his brothers with him until his last breath. In him we saw what it truly means to serve. As the Marines folded the flag, the haunting notes of taps filled the air. A single eagle flew overhead, circling once before disappearing into the clouds. After the ceremony, the folded flag was placed in Caprio's hands. He wanted you to have it, said the young Marine presenting it. He said you were the one who saw him. Caprio accepted it silently, tears rolling down his cheeks. He kept that flag in his courtroom from that day forward, displayed in a glass case beside a plaque that read, in memory of Sergeant James P. Sullivan, a Marine who never forgot his brothers, and a judge who remembered his humanity. A months passed, but Jim's legacy only grew. The Wall of Remembrance became a national pilgrimage site for veterans and families. Schools brought students there to learn about sacrifice, honor, and empathy. Homeless shelters across the country were renamed Sullivan Houses, dedicated to the belief that no veteran should ever be forgotten. Judge Caprio continued his work, but something in him had changed forever. He often spoke about Jim in interviews, not as a defendant but as a teacher. He reminded me, Caprio said, that justice without compassion is just paperwork. The law must serve the living, not the other way around. The years later, on the anniversary of Jim's passing, Caprio visited the wall alone. The names glowed softly under the evening lights. He placed a single white rose at the base and whispered, "Rest easy, Marine, you kept your promise." When he turned to leave, a young man approached, a Marine in uniform, maybe 22 at most. "Excuse me, sir," he said, saluting. "My grandfather served with Sullivan. He used to talk about him all the time. Said he was the best of us." Caprio returned the salute. "He was the best of all of us," he said. The young Marine smiled faintly. "We carry his name now. Every new recruit hears the story of the man who never left his brothers behind." As Caprio walked away, he realized something profound. The promise had outlived Jim. It had become part of the Marine Corps itself, passed from generation to generation, a living oath. And somewhere, in the quiet beyond time, 423 boys finally rested easy, knowing that one of their own had kept watch until the very end. That winter, the Smithsonian unveiled the exhibit dedicated to Jim's life. It was simple but powerful: his faded backpack, the notebook, a handful of dog tags, and a photo of him saluting before his wall. The inscription beneath read, "A promise kept is the truest act of courage." Visitors came from all over the world. Veterans stood silently before the display. Children asked their parents who he was, and they would answer, "That's the Marine who never forgot his friends." Judge Caprio lived long enough to see it. When he finally retired, he said in his farewell speech, "The law can punish or it can heal. It can condemn or it can honor." On that day in 2025, when a homeless Marine stood before me, I learned that the greatest form of justice isn't about guilt or innocence. It's about remembrance. He paused, his voice trembling. "That day, I didn't meet a trespasser, I met a hero." And with that, he stepped down from the bench one final time. In the years that followed, the story of James P. Sullivan became required reading in military ethics courses, law schools, and leadership seminars across the nation. His notebook was digitized and made available online. Each page bore the weight of lives remembered, promises fulfilled, and a nation's rediscovered gratitude. Every Veterans Day, the president lays a wreath at the wall of remembrance. Marines stand at attention. A boogler plays taps. And beneath the soft echo of the final note, the wind carries 4 simple words Jim once wrote on the last page of his notebook. They're home now. All of them.